Colm Imbert's False Fear-Mongering, Why Mandatory ID Carry Laws Are Common, Sensible, and Not Draconian. An editorial by Professor Wall Street. Diego Martin, Northeast MP, Colm Imbert's hysterical reaction to the UNC government's proposed mandatory ID carry law reveals everything that is wrong with PNM opposition tactics. His characterization of this common-sense measure as draconian and his ridiculous claim that this UNC government is one of the most draconian and oppressive administrations in the Western Hemisphere demonstrates a profound ignorance of international law and a desperate attempt to manufacture outrage where none should exist. The proposed requirement for Trinidad and Tobago citizens to carry identification at all times is neither novel nor oppressive. It is a standard practice in numerous developed democracies worldwide and serves important public safety and law enforcement purposes. Imbert's fear-mongering represents classic PNM red tricks, attempting to scare the population with false claims about perfectly reasonable governance measures. His statement about the UNC being one of the most draconian and oppressive administrations in the Western Hemisphere is particularly absurd when considered against the backdrop of actual authoritarian regimes and the PNM's own record of governance failures. This is political theater at its worst, designed to distract from substantive policy discussions with manufactured hysteria. Here are 10 reasons why Colm Imbert is absolutely wrong. 1. Mandatory ID laws are standard practice in many developed countries. All people on Belgian territory are required to carry identity documentation at all times and produce such documentation if and when requested by the police and other government authorities. Belgian citizens aged 15 and above are required to carry their identity card. Belgium, a founding member of the European Union and a model democracy, has had this requirement for decades without becoming a police state. 2. Germany has similar requirements. You're supposed to have an ID on you at all times. Your driving license only proves what you're allowed to drive. It is not an ID. Germany, one of the world's most robust democracies, requires citizens to carry identification at all times. This has not undermined democratic freedoms or civil liberties in any meaningful way. 3. Multiple European countries have ID carry requirements. Many countries in Europe and several states in the US do require identification, demonstrating that this is not an unusual or oppressive measure, but rather a standard law enforcement tool used by responsible governments worldwide. 4. The law serves legitimate public safety purposes. The proposed law is specifically designed to help enforce new age restrictions on alcohol consumption, marijuana use, and gambling. These are legitimate public health measures that require effective enforcement mechanisms. Without ID verification, age-based restrictions become meaningless and unenforceable. 5. It enhances law enforcement effectiveness. Police need to be able to verify identities during routine stops and investigations. ID carry requirements provide law enforcement with a basic tool for maintaining public order and investigating crimes. This is particularly important in a country grappling with high crime rates. 6. It reduces identity fraud and impersonation. Mandatory ID carry helps prevent identity fraud and impersonation, which are serious crimes that can facilitate everything from financial fraud to more serious criminal activities. This protection benefits law-abiding citizens. 7. It assists in emergency situations. During medical emergencies, natural disasters, or other crisis situations, proper identification can be crucial for providing appropriate assistance, contacting family members, and ensuring public safety. This is a practical benefit that protects citizens. 8. It's not unprecedented in Trinidad and Tobago. Citizens already carry identification for numerous activities: driving, banking, purchasing age-restricted items, and entering government buildings. Extending this to general public spaces is a logical extension of existing practices, not a radical departure. 9. Modern democratic countries balance security and freedom. In Belgium, EU citizens or family members of EU citizens must at all times be able to show proof of identity and right of residence if they are. It is therefore important to keep your identity and residence documents with you at all times, so that when necessary, you can prove who you are. This shows how democratic societies successfully balance individual freedoms with collective security needs. 10. Imbert's Western Hemisphere claim is demonstrably false. Imbert's claim that the UNC is one of the most draconian and oppressive administrations in the Western Hemisphere is utterly ridiculous when actual authoritarian regimes exist in countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. This hyperbolic comparison trivializes real oppression and reveals Imbert's disconnect from reality. The benefits of mandatory ID: carry laws, enhance public safety. ID requirements help police quickly identify suspects, witnesses, and victims during criminal investigations, improving response times and solving crimes more efficiently. Age verification for restricted activities. The law directly supports the enforcement of age restrictions on alcohol, marijuana, and gambling, protecting minors from harmful substances and activities. Reduced administrative burden. When citizens routinely carry ID, it streamlines police work and reduces the time spent on identity verification during routine stops and investigations. Immigration and border security. ID requirements help authorities distinguish between legal residents and undocumented individuals, supporting immigration enforcement and border security efforts. Counter-terrorism measures. In an era of global security threats, Idaho requirements provide a basic tool for preventing and investigating terrorist activities while maintaining democratic freedoms. Protection of vulnerable populations. ID requirements help protect vulnerable populations, including the elderly and disabled, by ensuring they can be quickly identified and receive appropriate assistance during emergencies. International examples prove the system works. The success of ID carry laws in countries like Belgium, Germany, and other European nations demonstrates that such requirements are perfectly compatible with democratic governance and civil liberties. These countries have not descended into authoritarianism. Instead, they have maintained high levels of public safety while preserving individual freedoms. As an EU national, you have the right to travel freely in the 27 EU member countries, as well as in Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland, non-EU countries but members of the Schengen area, carrying either a valid passport or a national identity card, ID card. This shows how ID requirements actually facilitate freedom of movement rather than restricting it. Fact-checking Imbert's Western Hemisphere. Claim. Imbert's assertion that the UNC government is one of the most draconian and oppressive administrations in the Western Hemisphere is not just wrong, it's offensively absurd. Consider the actual state of governance in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela, under authoritarian rule with restricted media, political prisoners, and economic collapse. Cuba, single-party communist state with no political freedoms. Nicaragua, increasingly authoritarian with suppressed opposition and restricted civil liberties. Haiti, failed state with gang violence and political instability. To compare a democratically elected government implementing common sense ID requirements to these genuinely oppressive regimes reveals either profound ignorance or deliberate misrepresentation designed to mislead the public. The real red tricks at work. Imbert's fear-mongering about ID requirements represents classic PNM red tricks, using inflammatory language and false comparisons to generate public panic about reasonable governance measures. This tactic seeks to distract from substantive policy discussions, create artificial controversy where none should exist, undermine public confidence in legitimate government actions, position the PNM as defenders of freedom against imaginary tyranny. This approach does a disservice to democratic discourse and prevents serious discussion of policies that could benefit Trinidad and Tobago's citizens. In conclusion, Colm Imbert's characterization of mandatory ID carry laws as draconian reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of both international best practices and the legitimate needs of law enforcement in Trinidad and Tobago. His hyperbolic claim about the UNC being among the most oppressive administration in the Western Hemisphere is not just wrong, it's an insult to victims of actual oppression throughout the Americas. The proposed ID requirement is a common sense measure used successfully by numerous democratic countries worldwide. It serves legitimate public safety purposes, supports the enforcement of age-based restrictions, and provides essential tools for law enforcement without undermining democratic freedoms. Instead of engaging in fear-mongering and false comparisons, Imbert should focus on constructive criticism and alternative proposals that serve Trinidad and Tobago's interests. The people deserve better than theatrical opposition designed to generate headlines rather than advance genuine policy solutions. The UNC government's proposal deserves serious consideration based on its merits, not rejection based on manufactured hysteria and international ignorance. Trinidad and Tobago would benefit from following the example of successful democracies that have implemented similar measures without sacrificing their democratic character or civil liberties.